Jy is geskakel op die Groot Ontbyt, Groot FM 90.5. Jy het geluister, Can't Stop the Feeling, Justin Timberlake. En ons volgende gas in die ateljee, en ek is opgewonde met my Engels moet nou opgeskerp word. Ons praat met Professor Ian Goldin, en hy is professor van globalisering en ontwikkeling, Universiteit van Oxford, en 'n direkteur by Oxford Martin School. A big welcome, Professor.
It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Sure, no, the pleasure is mine. I think it's the first time ever I've spoken to a professor at Oxford, so I'm a bit tense, yeah. But luckily, let's just, before we get to the book and what you're doing at this day and age, I want to take you way back just for context, and it's you grew up in Pretoria.
Absolutely.
In the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. I was born in Pretoria, and I spent the first 17 years of my life here. So I was at Pretoria Boys High. I used to come down past your studio here, Linwood Road, and there was nothing here but small holdings.
That's just amazing.
So it's amazing to come back here and to be here.
And then, and also Rondebosch.
Yes, my mother moved us to Cape Town when I was in Standard 9. Okay. And so I matriculated at Rondebosch Boys High.
And then, if I take you back, like academics, was that your first love? Seeing where you
really,
today?
No.
Not really.
No,
Okay.
I preferred jawling when I was at school and doing other things. So I wasn't really a terribly serious student. I should have been. I mean, this isn't advice I'm giving to others.
But luckily you won now.
But I mean, it was a difficult time in South Africa, the 70s, when I was at school. And sure. I went to UCT, then I left the country, and I came back in 94 and worked in the government of Mandela. So it was a big time to be away and amazing to be back, and I've been back many times a year since then.
And just for that part, because people don't know that, or general public, that you were advisor for Nelson Mandela, must have been just amazing. The worst advice you gave him? No.
He was much too smart to take wise advice. He listened to everyone, and he made up his own mind in the end, unlike some other rulers now. But my main job, I was chief executive of the DBSA, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and sort of driving past it on the way here this morning reminded me of those years. And it was an amazing time because there was so much to do. So we were connecting over 1 million households a year to electricity, water, and everything. And then sort of thinking about economic policy with Trevor Manuel and many other people. Sure. And Mandela was an amazing person in many respects, but he really listened and changed his mind a lot. Where he came from was a very different place to where he ended up, for example, on economic policy. And I respect him more than any other leader in the world.
And I remember just via the grapevine is that he could never understand why you should pay off a house. For him, it was a house, you must have a house. Everyone must have a house. The whole concept of you could buy a house and you pay it off over 20 years was just like, but why? It's a human right to have a house. Yeah. Those days were so different. I mean, we're not in a good situation, but we're going to talk about globally, but just South Africa. Do you also experience that? It was a fun time. Everyone really loved each other. It felt like the economy was going, but we moved a bit backwards.
Yeah. It was a honeymoon.
Yes.
The world loved us. We'd come through a real trauma. I think in the 70s and 80s, people thought we'd just all kill each other, and there'd be endless conflict. And so to be in a non-racial democratic society, welcomed by the world, be able to play sport with the world, be loved by the world, and we really were the poster child of transformation in the 90s. Led by an incredible person who was so big in his heart and really symbolized what it was to overcome differences. And we achieved a huge amount, but maybe it was a bit naive that we could overcome hundreds of years of segregation and separation and apartheid education and things in such a short time. Now we're in a very bad situation. I think there's certainly no honeymoon left. And unfortunately, corruption and other things have taken root, and we've become more ordinary as a country and as a leadership. And that is very frustrating because it doesn't have to be like that. And things are up for grabs. We have 3 of the biggest metros in opposition hands now. Who knows who's going to win the next election? And the one thing that really is solid is the Constitution.
Yes.
So I really do believe that it'll be a fair election. and that it's quite conceivable the ANC will win, but it's also conceivable they'll lose. And if they do lose, they'll give up power. So there are many things which are solid, and many achievements which we won't go backwards on, and it's really up for all South African citizens to shape their own future.
Our social media question this morning was like the leader that you see that really made an impact, a world leader, and I believe it's Nelson Mandela for you. If you can name 2 other people after him, just working on a global scale and your research on leaders, who comes up?
Well, I think what we've seen is the most extraordinary transformation of China. For being an isolated country where people were basically living in dire poverty, and under Mao, many millions of people died in famine and so on, to a country now which is, the size of the US in the economy, where income growth has been 10% a year, where 700 to 800 million people have been lifted out of poverty. And it's really for the things that Deng Xiaoping did, and now, President Xi. If you read his speech at Davos, he's the leader in the world on globalization, and has also made this incredible transformation from believing very much in a nationalist protectionist thing to being someone who's, I think, going to be the lead in the world on climate change, on many other global issues, but also on just trying to keep the global system going. So this irony of Trump withdrawing and China now, I mean, who would have thought, especially not someone growing up in Pretoria in the 70s, that China would be the world leader on trying to promote global capitalism
and they're totally opposite what they're thinking.
So I would put the Chinese leadership up there. And then that's a very difficult question. The thing about Mandela, and I met many, many global leaders, no one is in the same league as him. So you're talking about a different league, a second league, compared to the sorts of ethical, listening, and charismatic and other skills. So then maybe we have to go back in history to some other time.
To get someone. I'm going to interrupt you there, but we still got to talk about the book, and I still want some leaders and names from you. As jy net ingeskakel het, ons gesels met professor Ian Goldin oor sy boek en ook oor sy loopbaan, ongelooflik akademies van Pretoria tot in Oxford. Dit gebeur nie baie nie, ek weet nie veel ander Pretoriaaners is in Oxford nie. How many other guys from Pretoria is in Oxford, Professor?
I haven't met one yet.
But I mean,
but there are lots of students, of course, but not professors.
That's the point I wanted to make.
I'm sure there must be. There's Pretoria people everywhere in the world, including in Los Angeles in Tulsa.
we spoke about just South Africa, where we're at, but the book, and you're here because of the book, Age of Discovery, and luckily we've got some visuals of this book. And I just started the book. I'm just like a quarter. And it's just to start already broke my brain. Because it just gives you a bigger perspective. And I think even we had a discussion on race earlier on the program today. The moment you just broaden your brain in the way you see it, or I had a quote, Bill Clinton once said, I met someone with a brilliant brain, but a narrow mind. And I think that's to see the whole picture, to see China, to see Trump. First of all, why did you do the book?
I did the book because I've been trying to make sense of this world we live in. It's just constantly full of surprises. There's incredible progress. This is the best time in human history to be alive, but it's also the most dangerous time.
Yeah.
And trying to get sense of this uncertainty and gain perspective is why I did it. I've also been incredibly fortunate to be the founding dean of the Oxford Martin School. So we have 500 academics across the sciences, medicine, social sciences, humanities in Oxford, working on new cures for cancer, on quantum computing, on inequality, on government, and listening to them and understanding what's coming out of the labs and what's coming out of thinking. Made me realize, this is incredible. We live in a new renaissance. Chris Cutano, who was my co-author with the book, was doing a doctorate as well at the time on China. And just getting a sense of, why do we all feel so depressed? Why do we all feel so gloomy when there's all this amazing stuff going on? Mainly, we don't know about it. And when we do know about it, we don't know how it's going to shape our lives in the future. So I wanted a sense of optimism. The Renaissance we celebrate 500 years later at the moment. And we think about it as that most amazing time, which it was, of the Da Vinci's, Michelangelo's,
Yes.
but also the scientific inventions,
Yeah.
discovering the world was round, circumnavigation, the voyage of discovery, discovering we went around the sun, not the sun around us. We celebrated, but it was also a disastrous time for humanity. You know, extremists overtook Florence. The jihadist, Savonarola, and his bunch of extremists basically took the town over and deposed the Medicis. The Catholic Church was totally broken by the attacks from Luther, and others, because they were totally corrupt. You could buy your way to heaven with indulgences, which is about as corrupt as you can be. And so people challenged this and said, this change, this invention is leading to more uncertainty and to corruption. And the story I want to tell is how we gain perspective on what's happening, but also how we navigate more effectively than they did in the Renaissance to ensure that this is the best time. In our lifetimes, we can eliminate poverty, we can eliminate many diseases like cancer and many others, but we also can destroy the planet in lots of new ways. And unless we think about it and understand it and act, I think we will destroy the planet. So it's a call to action.
Yes.
And that's why I wrote it with Chris.
and just the word Renaissance, because if I think Renaissance, I see the big dresses and ballroom dancing, you know, and it's much deeper than that. And if you say Renaissance, like you say, Da Vinci, and you see Michelangelo, and they were living in the same time, I don't think they expected to change the world the way they did, and they still be remembered. But you also said, like, now you've got the Zuckerbergs. You know, he will probably be remembered in 500 years and not me. Is that, you know, but just to explain Renaissance and
so the Renaissance was the most amazing time. It took Europe from being one of the most backward places in the world in 1450 to by far the most advanced place within 50 years by 1500. How did this happen? Why was there this explosion of what we call genius, of talent, of creativity? And it was driven by an information platform, the Gutenberg press. Before that, basically, you only had handwritten manuscripts in Latin, in the monasteries. Most people, less than 1% of the population, could read or write. There was nothing that they could afford to read or write. And suddenly, within a 50-year period, you had 250 million books printed and billions of political pamphlets.
It's knowledge.
The 15th century
knowledge was in your hand. Yes.
Knowledge was in your hand, in your own language. There was a hunger to learn. And I compare the Gutenberg press to the World Wide Web. So the two things that happened, and my Renaissance starts in 1990 with the fall of the Berlin Wall, the breaking down of walls between societies. 4 months later, President Mandela was released from prison. These things were connected. And what the book is about is this connectivity. But it was also the year in which the World Wide Web was developed, 1990. And that information platform has taken us from having only about 500 million people connected in the world in the 80s to 6 billion people today. If you believe in people changing the world, there's a lot more actors out there, and they know what each other are doing. There's this connectivity. Incredible things which will improve our lives, but also very dangerous things like ISIS, which is the biggest recruiter of foreign fighters since the Spanish Civil War, using social media. So how this works and where it's going is what the book's trying to do. So the Renaissance was this period of huge breakthroughs driven by information technology.
Sure. I've got more questions. I'm going to stop you there. Luckily we got another segment to talk about the book. Gewoonlik gesels ons nie verder nie, maar ons doen vanoggend want ek is nou heeltemal oorrompel met al hierdie internasionale feite waarmee ons sit. And it's Professor Ian Goldin, en professor van globalisering en ontwikkeling van Universiteit van Oxford. Ongelooflik. A big welcome again. Let's start with the word globalization. It was a massive word for years, but it's such an interesting thing in the beginning of your book, just showing Google searches how it went down the last 10 years, people not searching the word anymore, these new words or new terms.
Yeah, it's become quite toxic. No politician wants to say they like globalization. We have Trump and Brexit sort of symbolizing how anti-globalization is working, and we see what might happen across Europe now and in other countries. So People don't like using the world, but it carries on. It's been the most incredible force. Nothing that we do would be possible without it. People's mobile devices, the show, the changes in South Africa, everything is a result of globalization, by which I just mean integration, connectivity, flows across borders of ideas, of technologies, of goods, of services. We cannot imagine our lives without these flows. We'd be in North Korea. That's the only non-globalized country in the world. Back 100 years or something.
Yeah.
So we need to think what's good and what's bad and what's ugly in it. And then we need to manage in our own lives and as countries and as communities to harvest the good, have much more good that comes from globalization, try and dampen down the bads, and like pandemics or cyber attacks or terror and many other bads, and make sure the ugly doesn't happen. And the ugly is what can really destroy the world.
Sure.
From groups like ISIS to climate change.
Yeah.
Those are the ugly side effects of globalization. So to me, it's sort of meaningless to not talk about it. It's most probably the most important force shaping the world.
Yeah.
It brings the greatest opportunities. It will bring new cures for cancer and many other things which will change our lives for the better, but it could also kill us. So if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But you're missing out what's really
Definitely.
important, and that's what the book is trying to focus on.
Do you think we're ready to handle it, the human race? Because also, like you said, the printing press, it was very slow, all of a sudden realizing the world's not flat. And then you could think about it before you realize, oh, there's a thing that's called a train.
Yeah.
But now, every single morning, I'm on Twitter, I'm bombarded with new amazing things that's too big for my brain to handle.
Yeah.
Do you think it happens too fast?
No, I don't. I mean, some people say what we're seeing in Trump and what we're seeing in Brexit, for example, even in South Africa, is a reaction against change. I don't think so. The places that are changing the most rapidly is the happiest places, or the places that are happy with change. In the US, New York, say, and San Francisco are what is really changing fast. Only 3% of the people in New York or San Francisco voted for Trump. The same in London. 75% of Londoners voted to remain in Europe.
Yes,
it wasn't the
Brexit.
Londoners that voted for Brexit.
Yes.
It's the people that are left behind by change, that don't change, that can't change, because they can't afford to live in New York or London or a big city. It's the people who don't have the new technologies, who don't have these opportunities, that don't have the new jobs, that are most threatened by change. And so my own view is that actually we're very good at embracing change. And the problem is if you can't do it. The problem is if you live somewhere and you can't get to the city where the jobs are, or you can't get the new technologies and you're stuck with old ones, or you can't get the new cures for diseases. Then you really get threatened and you resent the people. And change also does something else. When things change more rapidly, people get left behind more quickly. And in the most rapid change the world has ever known. Today's the slowest day you'll know for the rest of your life. And if you get left behind, it's harder and harder to catch up. And so that's why we need to worry much more about individuals, about others being left behind, as societies, about people being left behind. Because those are the people that are going to stop change, and they will destroy the potential for all of us to lead a healthier, better life. And that's what's happening in the US, that's what's happening in the UK and across Europe.
Yes.
It's the people left behind that are trying to stop change. And we need to worry about why that's happening. They're not imagining they're left behind, they are.
Yeah,
People in the Midwest of the US's life expectancy is lower than their parents'. Their unemployment rates are lower than their parents'.
Yeah.
They say globalization, it's done nothing for us. It's destroyed our lives, our jobs, etc. And they're right.
Yeah.
So we know this is not that these guys are just sort of trying to be hard.
The influence was now big enough to bring
So
in
we need to worry about people left behind more.
And that's the people from in between the coast to coast.
In the US, but all our societies have it. And certainly South Africa has a lot of people being left behind.
Yes.
And their countries being left behind.
On a personal note, the last question, a guy from Pretoria, Boys High, and then you write a book, it's your 20th book or 21st book, and then people like Ariana Huffington, she's now also decided to relax a bit. Sir Richard Branson talks about, just do a write-up about your book. Garry Kasparov, chess champion. How does that feel? these people that read your book?
They're very kind of them to say nice things. It's always nice for a writer to get good feedback, and when people who lots of people follow want to say it publicly, it's just very generous of them to do that. So, I mean, I'm really happy with the endorsements on this book, not only because so many of my heroes have endorsed it, but also because they come from very different perspectives.
Yes.
There's someone like Kumi Naidoo, the head of Greenpeace, and someone like Neil Ferguson. I don't think they've ever agreed on anything. Other than that, they like the book. So I'm happy about that.
That's fantastic. There was no resistance from Greenpeace when you launched the book. Professor, thank you so much.
It's been a huge pleasure to be on your show. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Can't wait to finish the book.
Thank you.